Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here today for Quick Tip Thursday. Today's topic is digitally cross-processing in Topaz Adjust. So if you're unfamiliar with cross-processing, it is a technique that was originally discovered when processing actual film. So basically the processing negative film within slide chemicals, which is a positive film, or vice versa, could create these highly stylized images that have these kind of crazy, surrealistic, unnatural colors and pretty heavy contrast. With the actual film process, it's not necessarily the exact same look over and over again because it does change with each type of film, with the amount of seconds that you're processing. So it's kind of a hit and miss, but it still was a very popular look amongst fashion and wedding photographers, and now we have the ability to really work with it digitally as well. So, and with Topaz Adjust, we have an even simpler way than working with it with our curves or Photoshop technique. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we do this within Topaz Adjust. All right, let me show you a few before and afters really quickly. Most of these were done with just a one click. So here is before and after. Again, these are really, it's a well-known look for certain types of more edgier wedding or lifestyle photographs. Here's before and after. But I like to use it on kind of more mundane subjects or graphic subjects to really bring out certain tonalities in the image and make it super interesting, or even landscape images as well. And here's after. All right, we'll go ahead and take this image in, and then I'll go ahead and take the portrait image in as well. Here's before and after. So I'm going to turn this background copy off. Just click on my background, make a new copy, and go to Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Adjust 5. Within Topaz Adjust 5, it is specific to 5. We have something called our film collection. In the film collection, we have Cross Process 1, Cross Process 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all of these actual tonalities and tones that you see being added into this image are coming from realistic film cross-processing that I have had in front of me. So I pulled all these types of looks from different cross-processing that I could use to try to create these more realistic cross-process types of colors. So let's go ahead and start with this cross-process 5 for this image, because that's where the after image is in Photoshop. So initially, just starting out, we have before and after. Now I just want to show you a couple things that each of these presets has that you might want to come over here on the right-hand side to play around with to make it more your own, and not just have it be this one-click kind of same look across the across everything. I also want to show you where these colors are coming from, so you have the opportunity to change that. One thing that you should know on top of the different tones that we're pulling into this image or bringing into this image is about contrast. The contrast in cross-processed images are usually quite high and dramatic, and I always try to remind myself not to be scared to kind of lose some of the detail in my highlights and shadow areas where I would be if I'm doing a more traditional or subtle processing, where I don't want to go over processed with my image. But this whole look is about being super stylized and somewhat very contrasty, where you do start to lose that. So many times I like to come in and actually go directly into my adaptive exposure tab under my global adjustments and play with that a little bit more. With all of these presets, you'll notice that the adaptive exposure is set about midway, set pretty high, about 0.5 or so, but the regions are at 1. This is to make it a little bit more dramatic of a contrast adaptively, but if you want to get some nice localized exposure going on within the image and still amp up your contrast, you can do that. You can do that by taking your regions up. That's going to give you a more balanced overall look, but now I can come into my contrast and continue to add contrast into my image. Another thing that you might want to know about as well is within the Details tab, on all of these I have processed the details independently to kind of take that topaz look away and give it a more natural detail enhancement. Because without this, it starts to become grungy, but that's really appropriate for some of these types of images. So if you want that more grungy effect, just unclick that process details independently, and you'll start to see that detail and grunge and style come back in. Also, I have added additional details, so if you just want the regular details that come with your exposure enhancements, you can work on that by taking that down. I'm going to take this contrast even more up. And now we're going to jump down to, excuse me, the Finishing Touches tab, where most of the magic here is taking place. Within the Finishing Touches tab, we have grain that I've added into all of these presets. If you don't like the grain, such as for a portrait, just uncheck it. It'll become less grainy. Warmth, there is a bit of warmth in most of these because it helps to achieve that underlying warm tone that's in most of the cross-processing highlights that you'll find. Also, there's a bit of a vignette attached to it, so if you don't like that vignette, just uncheck it. In the Tone tab is really where all of the tone is coming from. There's going to be a black in the 0 region, which is the low end of the 0 to 255 tonal range scale. So you'll see the black in that color 1 region. You'll see the white going into the color 4 region, which is positioned at the 255, which is the white end of your tonal range scale. So it all makes sense, really. And with if we're just doing 0 to 255, you should see a lower end gray or a lighter gray. Well, here we see a bright pink and a bright yellow. The pink is being added into the shadowy area of our tonal scale at around 4250. So you'll see the shadows in between the trees, the dark edges of the lakes, the shadows underneath the chair. They start to take on this pink tonality going in there. And then you'll see this yellow being added into the color 3 region, which happens to be placed on the higher or lighter tones of our tonal scale. So these highlights within the trees, the highlights on the lake itself, where it's a little bit brighter here, you'll see that those are more of a yellow scale. And that's how those are being added in to create these cross-processed looks. So if you want more black and less of this pink color coming into your shadows, all you need to do is take this color 2 region and kind of push it towards the right, because what that will do is allow you to come in and take your black to the right as well, making all of this area from 0 to 30 all black, so you can see it really took those shadow areas and made them really strong. You can do the same thing with your whites. So you can just come in here and play around with everything and really see how this is working. If you want it to be a stronger cross-processed look, you can take this tone strength to be to the left, and it will add more of the tone, versus if you go to the right, you'll see more and more of the image itself. So it can be a really subtle cross-processed look. Here's before and after, if that's something you might call subtle. Or it can be something where you see a lot of the tone coming through. So those are my tips on creating a cross-process looks within Adjust. I'm going to turn this over to you because this is just a 15-minute session. I want to take some of your questions right now, but I also want to work on another image while we do that. So let me cancel out of here. I'll show you again how we ended up. Here's before, and then after. I really love the cross-processed look. It's a way to go very super stylized in a very unique way. All right, we'll take our picture here. Let me show you this before. And we'll go ahead and hop on in. Okay, let's see the questions that are coming through. And that opened on my other screen. Let's pop that on over there. Let's see here. Glenn said, can I show how this might work with portraits? There you go. All right, so let's talk about this. I usually come over here when I'm actually looking for this cross-processing technique and just use the presets first and kind of get inspired by one of these looks and then move on from there. It's a great place to just start out. And so with this particular portrait image, I'm really kind of more attracted to this kind of green aqua sky. Yes, I like that better. Kind of more brown undertones happening versus red. So I like what's happening here. So let's see here. I'm going to go into my finishing touches first. I tend to actually do this. I go to my finishing touches in the tone first and then kind of hop up into my global adjustments. Usually completely different workflow from a regular workflow of processing your image in Adjust. We usually say go from the top to the bottom. Well, with this particular technique, I like to get my color correct first and then play with it. So for the portrait image, there's a really heavy grain set on all of these. Let me show you that. So you can see here's before and after, and here's with the grain. For me, I'm going to go ahead and take that grain off and just get a smoother portrait. I like the warmth where it is. I'm not too concerned about my vignette. Let's open up this tone. So there's a couple things I'm not really liking. I'm losing some detail here. I feel like the skin tone is going a little too greenish. So I'm going to bring some of the white, I guess, back into these highlights. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my color 3 region down, which will open up the blend between my color 4, which is white, and the blue. So it'll add some more additional white into my highlights. Same thing with the brown undertones. I want to get some of the darkness coming back into my shadows. So I'm just going to take this more to the right, which will increase the blend between my black and my brown. If you're interested in how this tone module specifically is working underneath, I do have a quick tip webinar that specifically goes over this toning module. So that will give you a little bit more insight if this kind of is throwing you a bit. Then I'm going to check out my tone strength. I'm going to actually increase the tone just a little. So here's where we're at before, after, completely different image altogether. Now I'm going to go into my adaptive exposure and figure out, can I open up some of these shadow areas and kind of get a little bit more balance going on between her skin and everything else. So what I'm going to do is just take this regions and go to 2. Yes, and maybe even 3. And automatically I start to get a little bit more balanced of an image. Tone, exposure-wise, it's going to take my really highlight areas like her skin and the sky and darken it versus her dress and hair. It will lighten that, so that's really nice. And I want to bring some detail back in. So I'm going to open up my details and uncheck process details independently. Here's where we were. Now I can add detail, or I can see the individual hairs. I like that better. And I might even take that strength up just a little on her details. There we go. So here's before and after. And that is how I would work with it on an image, Glenn. I hope that helps. Gordon says, are the color choices for regions 2 and 3 part of the preset? Yes, the color choices are not different. The region is not going to select the tonality. What it's going to do is help the exposure be locally applied across your image, so it's going to help balance out the tones. So if you find that here it's a little too contrasty for you, but you kind of like the overall feeling, know that all of these presets over here, these cross-process ones, and that's one I just wanted to kind of tell you about. All of these presets all start off, so this is where we were, they all start off with an adaptive exposure adjustment of approximately 0.5 and then a regions of 1. The reason that regions is 1 is because cross-processing is not usually a very balanced type of tonal range. It's usually quite contrasty. So when this regions is at 1, it is going to be quite contrasty if your adaptive exposure is that high. So as I take my adaptive exposure up, you see it just continues to get more contrasty until I take my regions up, and then all of a sudden it starts balancing it out and allowing tonality to come into both of my highlights and my shadows and just balancing that exposure out. So that's just a trick as far as these particular presets are concerned. Glenn, in regards to the portrait image, says, how would I darken the image more with, say, a bluish cast? Great question. So, okay, let's say you come and you got this cross process 3 preset. My suggestion, let me get back to where we were. We're about right here, about right here. We had done this, taken up our strength. I just want to get back to where we were because I was liking that particular effect. So the grain was unchecked. And then we have a couple things here that I can suggest to you, Glenn. If you like the overall feeling or the overall tones, but you're not necessarily liking the warmth, there is warmth that is placed into all of these presets. So you can either uncheck that and you get a more cooler feeling, or you can even take that down and get a much cooler feeling while not necessarily changing the tones. Or let's take this back up to 10 where it was. You can kind of still keep that warmth about it, but change the, let's say, he said he wanted a bluish cast. When you come into your tone, you can do this, what I would suggest is that you look at the image and you decide, where do you want that bluish tone? Do you want it in your midtones? Do you want it in your shadow regions? So let's say I wanted less of this warm tone in my shadow area and more of a bluer tone. So I just open up my, actually this was more like this, wasn't it? Yes, it was. I can do this in a couple different ways. I would probably personally choose one of these and go for a bluish tone and go for blue just in my shadows because there's quite a lot of blue actually happening in my highlights. If you'd rather it be a different blue, you can just open that up and slide that to a different blue, and then you'll start to see those changes take effect. Or if you want it more in your shadow areas, open up your shadow tones. For this particular one, there's the black tone and this more orangey brown tone, and you can push it more towards the blue. So I'm not sure if you just saw that, but here's where we were. And once we change that to the blue, you'll see all of those lower mid-tone shadows just turned more bluish. If you even want to go further than that and have the very darkest colors take on a blue cast, you can open that up and get your black, take it to your blue areas, or your blue, open that up to where you start getting a navy or a darker blue, press OK. Let's make it a little bit more obvious so you can tell. Okay, so here's before and after. So everything can just start taking on that blue tone. If you want it to be stronger and you want more of that tone color being added into your image, you take that tone strength down and it'll be a stronger effect. Scott says, does regions and adaptive exposure relate to regions and finishing touches? It does not. The adaptive exposure and regions technology has been in Topaz Adjust since the beginning. Basically what it is the adaptive exposure will be applied to your image differently based upon how many regions you select your image to have. You can look at the regions kind of like a grid that is placed upon your image. As you take the regions up, there's going to be more and more and more columns and rows within that grid. That's a very quick way of me describing it. There is a quick tip video on our YouTube channel that was added last week that says Understanding Regions in Topaz Adjust. I think it's a quick 10-minute one where I actually show a nice little slideshow that shows exactly what the regions here does. As far as the regions and the finishing touches under the tone, this is actually your color 1 region, your color 2 region, your color 3 region, your color 4 region. The regions are talking about the area of the tonal scale from 0 to 255. The 0 being black and 255 being white. So if your color 1 region, which is this, your color 1 is the square above it, the little swatch of color above it, that blue. Your color 1, if it's placed at 0, then that color is going to be placed into your darkest area of your image, which is going to be that black area. And then it's going to slowly blend into the next color region area. So this particular color 2 region is at 80 on the tonal scale. So there'll be a blend between this color and this color as you, and you can change that. You can change exactly what's happening here. So I think it's a lot of fun to play with these things. Then your color 2 region will blend into your color 3. The color 3 is actually placed pretty high on the lighter area of the image. So you have a long blend of these two colors. And then lastly, your color 3 will blend with your color 4. Now, just to give you a quick idea of what's happening, you can create a negative if you just go the opposite direction on both of these things and take your tone strength all the way down. So you kind of understand, I've just switched the color 4 to now be at 0, which is white is being placed into the darkest areas of my image. Then we're blending into this other color 3, which is now in the shadow regions, this color 2, which is now in my lighter areas, and then the darkest color, the darkest blue, is now in my sky. So I hope that gives you a really quick idea. Again, if you want to take a look at that video, Quick Tip Thursday, talking about the toning abilities within Adjust 5, it covers that quite thoroughly. With that, I will let you go, and I hope you have a good morning, evening, or day, wherever you are. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.